funny. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and start my script because I see we got quite a few people in here and I want to go while it's 12:01. So 1 second, get to my script. Here we are. Okay. So hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today at Secular AZ. For those of you who are joining us in the webinar, feel free to put your name in the chat, or if you're on Facebook, put your name in Facebook and tell us where you're from while you're here. We are a nonprofit organization focused on protecting the Constitution and the separation of church and state for over a decade. We have great programming. As you can see, our Friday updates have speakers from all walks of life. We have historians, elected officials, journalists, authors, you name it. Next Friday, I'm really excited. We're going to be joined by a woman named Sarah Mosner, who is the lead of the After Purity Project and the author of Virgin Nation, Sexual Purity and American Adolescence. So really great conversation about purity culture that I'm very much looking forward to. After that, I think is when we're going to kick off our series about the ties between evangelical extremists and guns, or also known as ammosexuals. I really enjoy doing these thematic discussions. So if you want to hear something, please let us know. I know that Mars gave us a great suggestion yesterday about religious hospitals and medical exemptions because of religion. So if there's something that interests you, please let us know. And if you're interested in getting more involved with our organization, we are looking for volunteers to help with our school board support initiative. And we're also looking for folks to fill some of our school board of our board of directors vacancies. We're not going to put you on a school board or anything like that, unless you want, and then I could probably point you in the right direction. And then of course we're going to, the weather's hopefully starting to cool down a little bit, and we're going to be ramping up with our events. I believe the first one coming up is going to be Pride. So if you're interested in volunteering at our table, we would love to have you. But today, without further ado, I'm very, very excited to be speaking with our presenter today. Carol Burris is the Executive Director of the Network for Public Education, NPE. She served as principal of Southside High School in the Rockville Centre School District in New York. She received her doctorate from Teachers College, Columbia University. Her dissertation on equitable practices in mathematics instruction received the 2003 National Association of Secondary Schools Principals Middle Level Dissertation of the Year Award. Wow, that's a mouthful. She was the 2010 School Administrators Association of New York State Outstanding Educator of the Year and the National Association of Secondary School Principals 2013 New York State High School Principal of the Year. She serves as a fellow of the National Education Policy Center, has published 3 books on educational equity, and authored or co-authored pieces in educational leadership, the Kappan, the American Educational Research Journal, Theory into Practice, the School Administrator and EdWeek. Whew. Okay, did I miss anything from that amazing resume, Carol?
No, you did not, and it demonstrates how old I am. So anyway, it's such a pleasure to join you today. I was for many years a very happy teacher, and then both the middle and high school levels, and then a high school principal. And finally, when I retired, Diane Ravitch tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, would you run the Network for Public Education? Oh, it won't be a lot of work." Well, I did not see what was coming down the pike. Unfortunately, we who love public schools really are fighting a lot of battles every day. And I thank you for being part of that fight. Anyway, many people right now are very upset that Oklahoma has allowed the first, or at least permitted, it hasn't started yet, the first religious charter school. ACLU, others have gotten involved in this. They're challenging it. Well, we at the network are concerned, but my thing is like a birthday present is a surprise. This is no birthday present. We just could see this coming. In fact, what we've seen is that there have been quasi-religious charter schools for quite a while. And so what we decided to do was we decided to do a report and really dig deep into this, because what we noticed was that these charter schools that are semi-religious, that are right-wing charter schools, not only are they not new, they're opening at an accelerated pace. And so we wrote a report on it. And what I'm going to do with you now is just step through it a little bit. But because this is secular AZ, I'm going to be focusing on the Christian right aspect of these charter schools, because a lot of them, frankly, they're Christian nationalist schools. And you, the taxpayers, are paying for them, especially in the state of Arizona. So when we took a look at this last year, we were able to identify 273 charter schools that were presently open, that were either classical charter schools, which is kind of the, I don't know, the veil that's put in front of a lot of these schools, or they were right-wing designed to attract conservative and religious families. And we see it because there are tells, right? There are certain symbols that are on the website. They don't talk about values, they talk about virtues. They talk about, in some cases, that it's a faith-friendly school, or they have some kind of an affiliation with a religious organization. And while we identified 273, we know that there are more out there. I mean, there is not a list, a national list, or even a state list of the schools. So what we had to do was to go through websites. Couldn't go through every website, there are far too many charter schools, but to go through the names and look for some of the tells that let us know that the charter school belongs in this category. And what we found, because we looked over the years, we also looked at the year in which these 273 schools opened. And we found out that 47% of the schools we identified have opened since the inauguration of Donald Trump. So that they kind of went along like this for a while. And then all of a sudden, they really took off. And what frightened us even more was that we identified 67 schools in the pipeline that are opening this school year or next school year. And my guess is there are probably even more. So when you take a look at them, we also dug deep into, well, where are these schools and what are their demographics like? Are they kind of the typical charter school that we're used to? Is this a school, for example, that's for disadvantaged students or for kids that have dropped out? And we found this is not the case at all. We found that they were disproportionately white as compared to the typical charter school. The typical charter school overall, including these schools, is 29% white. The schools that we identified as right-wing schools were 52% white. And then the starkest difference was the percentage of students that came from low SES house schools with students receiving free or reduced price lunch. 48%, about half of all charter school students, are from low-income households. And the number, by the way, for public schools overall is very close. I think it's 47%. However, in these schools, it was much lower. It was only 17%. We found, as you might expect, that they are predominantly located in red states. That's not to say there aren't some in red pockets of blue states like California, for example. But for the most part, the biggest numbers are in the red states. And Arizona, you're number one, 86 schools. 86 schools. And what was also very interesting about Arizona schools, whether they are disproportionately run by for-profit organizations. About 33% of your schools are run by for-profits in the state of Arizona. However, in this particular sector, it was much higher. I believe it was 86%, thereabouts, a lot higher. Oh, sorry, 59%, I wrote it down. Texas, number 2 with 54 schools. Florida, number 3 with 24 schools. And then after that, the numbers start to diminish. So let's talk about some of the things that I found when we did the report. There's one large chain in your state called American Leadership Academies. American Leadership Academies are owned and run by Glenn Way and his family members. There is also a related real estate corporation, but they didn't begin in Arizona. They actually began in Utah. Glenn Way, who was a member of the legislature in Utah, who had to resign amid scandal, was heavily involved in the American Leadership Academy in Spanish Fork, Utah. He was one of the founders of it. He's since then withdrawn from that particular charter school. It's not part of the chain, even though it has the same name. But I was like pretty shocked when I looked at their website, because what I found was posted on their website was a video that was clearly designed to be a baptismal video, right? With the kids singing about values and faith and being immersed in water. And I'm like, hey, wait a minute, this has to be a private school. And I kept checking and double checking. Sure enough, it was a public charter school. That video has since gone down, but I took a screenshot of another one that's up on Utah, and it's the choir from this publicly funded charter school, the ALA choir, which they're very talented students. I mean, they're wonderful. But they're singing what I think as a former high school principal would be an inappropriate song for a choir to sing. And it's called Stand in Faith. And the tell is the note that's written underneath it, which says we want to help kids and adults turn to Jesus or become Jesus people. And you can go ahead and you can find this on the internet. And most of the song is sung in a church in front of an altar. It may not be a church. It may actually be a Mormon temple. I'm not quite sure. There's no identification. But a lot of American Leadership Academy, a lot of what it does is it places the schools in areas with large Mormon populations and seeks to attract Mormon students. Here's one of the ones in Arizona. And there had been a report in the Arizona Republic that said that ALA targeted Phoenix families in the Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints. And you can see in the background the Mormon Tabernacle. Cincinnati Classical Academy, a Hillsdale charter school. You've probably heard a little bit about Hillsdale College, which is a very conservative Christian college, very connected with Donald Trump and with the religious right. And they now have a chain of charter schools where the charter schools are operated not by Hillsdale, they might be independent or operated by another chain, including ALA. However, all of the curriculum is supplied by Hillsdale College, and their staff training, and they'll even supply teachers from Hillsdale for the schools. And then there's different levels of connection. This particular one that's pictured is called the Cincinnati Classical Academy. And I really suggest that you Google it. Your mouth's going to drop open because you're going to take a look at the pictures on the website. This is a picture we took ourselves. We had somebody on our board go to the school and take a picture of it, but you'll see pictures that are even more dramatically displaying the cross on the top of the school on the website. And if you were a parent and you were looking at this, you would think that what this was a private Christian school. They don't even have on the website that this is a charter school. It talks about a free school, right? Um, I have a feeling that the school is located in a church. I don't think they built this building and put a cross on top, but they're very much emphasizing the fact that it's in a building with a cross on the top in all of their literature and on their website. And there were other aspects. They have pictures in the halls that we saw that were religious pictures. And again, like the other Hillsdale schools, they talk about virtue. The kids that you see, this is Cincinnati, Ohio, but you hardly see a child on the website who is a child of color. It's predominantly, white teachers teaching white kids. It's hard to say with a lot of these charter schools if the pictures that you see are even real pictures. American Leadership Academy that I just talked about is doing a rapid expansion out of Arizona into North Carolina and South Carolina. And they'll put up their websites before the school is even approved and opened. And so you'll see sort of these stock photographs of kids who are smiling and blonde and the teacher who's, are very happy. And they make it appear as though you're actually seeing photographs of what's happening inside the school. And a lot of times it's a school that hasn't even been built. But again, there are all of these tells, flags, eagles, founder symbols, all kinds of things to attract a certain kind of family and make that kind of family feel comfortable in the school. What we also found as we did the report was that a lot of these charter chains have origins in the religious school community, or they are founded by church leaders, and they still have some connections that are ongoing. One of the chains, Great Hearts Academy, is in Arizona and Texas, maybe a few schools in a few other places, but predominantly that's where Great Heart lives. And what they're doing now, because of your ESA voucher program, is they're not only continuing to run their charter schools, but they're also opening up private schools called Great Heart Christos. And they're going to be religious schools and they're going to be voucher schools because, as you know, unfortunately, your ESA voucher program now has made it profitable to open these schools, and they don't have to charge much tuition, if any, at all. And they've had a long history. Their founder referred to homosexuality as an aberration when he was running for public office. There is a history of discrimination against trans children. There was an LGBT club that was started at the school, and when they found out they couldn't ban the club, they banned all student-led clubs rather than have that one club exist. And when we did the report, the person who worked with us on it, Karen Francisco, was wonderful. She's a retired reporter from Indiana. She would look at like Glassdoor sites to see what some of the reviews were for some of these schools. And there's a quote from one of them, which says that Great Hearts are conservative Christian schools, and the higher ups have made violently homophobic comments. That was a comment that was left from a former Great Hearts employee in Goodyear, Arizona. And there were other comments there as well about teachers having to have Bibles in the classroom. And unfortunately, what often happens with charter schools is that, we really don't know what's happening inside them until people leave. And then all of a sudden they spill the beans. I can't tell you how many calls I get either from parents or from former charter school teachers who'll call up and say, oh, I didn't know it was going to be like this, and I left the school, or they fired me, or what. And, now the stories start coming out, but most of the time, parents don't want to be forthcoming with many of these things, or teachers don't want to be forthcoming because they're afraid that they'll be dismissed. Another big chain with religious roots is one called Responsive Ed, which is interesting. It has sort of a very secular name. It's a very, very large charter school chain in Texas. They were trying to move into Tennessee. I don't think they have any schools in Arizona, but it wouldn't surprise me if they tried. They've been around for a while, and the owner of this chain is the former owner of the Accelerated Christian Education. And especially in the beginning, until some lawyers stepped in, the school included blatantly right-wing Christian beliefs across the curriculum. They were teaching creationism, and other things. And finally, somebody spilled the beans and they were brought to court and they had to stop. But they do things in Texas, for example, if there's a failing Christian school, what they do is they go into it and they take it and they flip it into a charter school, right? So it's the same kids, the same kind of culture, but now it's a charter school 100% supported by the taxpayers. And this particular chain was recently involved in a scheme in Texas to funnel money as vouchers using its charter school. It was this crazy scheme that was written up in Texas Monthly, where they went to a district and essentially said to the district, hey, look, we're going to put in this charter school, right? But it wasn't really going to be a charter school. And the money would go to the charter school, and then the charter school money would go out as vouchers to parents. So they would probably take some kind of a cut in between. But anyway, luckily, the superintendent of the school, had the courage to say, this is crazy. And he spilled the beans, and eventually the plot was stopped. But don't be surprised if somebody tries this in your state or in Florida or even in California. We see a lot of crazy things. Some other examples too, and they were not even necessarily schools that were included in our list, but these are charter school chains because they weren't classical schools per se. These are chains, or right wing, these are chains that have bothered me personally for a while. One of them is in New York. It's called Brilla Charter Schools. They are located in closed Catholic schools. What happens is the Catholic school shuts down, usually up in the Harlem area or in New York City, in an Hispanic area. And then Brilla takes them over and opens them up as a charter school. And they're operated by a nonprofit that also operates private Catholic school. And, I was raised Catholic and I attended Catholic schools, so I kind of know, all of these symbols. And you could see that there are symbols, for example, that, look like the host, right? And so you can see there's sort of a tell that's there, who they're appealing to. And then what happens is that they have religious classes right after the school bell rings. So let's say it's 2:30 or it's 3:00, the school day ends, and then they provide religious instruction. Another chain is the Hebrew language charter schools in New York and the Ben Gamla charter schools that are in Florida. And these are charter schools that essentially appeal to families that want a Jewish education. And while there will be some students in the school who will not be Jewish, a lot of times the majority of the students are. When the Hebrew language charter schools were founded, by a very wealthy New Yorker. He said, and he put it out in the press, I want schools that people who can afford yeshivas can attend. And so they teach, for example, cultural, Israeli cultural pieces, and then also that everybody is required to take Hebrew as a language. And there are several that are in New Jersey. And what they do is the school day ends, and then they provide free busing. I'm sure not through public money, but through some private funds or maybe connections with synagogue. But they provide the free busing to get the kids, at least I hope not through public funds. And nothing surprises me, so I probably should have made that assumption. And then what they do is they bus the kids over to to religious instruction after school. In Florida, you see the Ben Gamlas located basically in the Miami area, and in some other parts of Florida. And they're often, the schools are often located in synagogues. So anyway, these are some of the things that I wanted to make you aware of, and I wish more people would be upset about it, right? I mean, there's always this kind of feeling that, well, if you're not teaching religion explicitly during the day, it's not a problem. Well, to me, if it's public money, then what you're doing is you're using the charter school as a facade to actually, have a school that is in many ways a religious school and is meant to attract a certain kind of student who wants a conservative religious education, and to discourage other kids from enrolling by not appealing to them, by not putting kids on the website who look like them and have their life experiences. I think that's a misuse of public funds. And it certainly was not what the charter movement was meant to be years ago when it started. And just a little plug at the end. I'd love to see you come. We have a conference in Washington, D.C., October 28th, 29th. We have a panel on religious charter schools. We also have lots and lots of panels on vouchers, including vouchers in Arizona, as well as panels on separation of church and state. And if you're interested in attending, go to our website. The link is there, and you can find out more about it.
Well, I, for one, am really excited about this conference, and I'm really glad that, Lindsay made this connection and that you're here today joining us, because the things that you're talking about are definitely things that our members care about. And when we talked before we started, I said, should questions come before or after? And you said after, because inevitably, well, I'll get to the answer. And sure enough, the first question we had, I don't remember, I think it came from Matt, was about the American Leadership Academy, because he drives by one every day. And yeah, there's several. I looked it up when you were speaking, and there's a whole bunch in Gilbert, a whole bunch in Queen Creek, and Mesa, of course, and that is where our largest Mormon population lives as well. So not surprising, but really, really, really disappointing, because I consider myself fairly well-versed when it comes to the privatization movement, but I definitely wasn't aware of how many of these schools exist. That's really scary.
Yeah, and Mr. Way and his family, they're making a lot of money off those schools, which is a whole other issue. The schools are kind of a front they want in Arizona, you actually can have for-profit charter schools. You are the only state in the nation that allows that, where the school itself could be a for-profit. But there was a case that went before the U.S. Department of Education and then went up to the courts, where the U.S. Department of Education stepped in and said, no, you have to be a nonprofit in order to be able to receive federal funds. Well, a lot of people in Arizona, Leona, I mean, you're probably familiar with the Leona schools in Arizona. They went and they challenged it, they lost. So what they started to do was put up these nonprofit facades, right? So what Glenway will do is, he'll grab some people in the community, they put together a board, but then they run what are called sweeps contracts, where all of the money that comes into the school is then given to the for-profit organization to run the school. So it really is a for-profit operation. So then he also owns, with some of his friends, a company that builds the school. Then because his for-profit is the manager of the school, they connect, right? His son sells the uniforms to the school. He has a big family and his kids are all involved in this. So, I think on a couple of levels, it's problematic. One is that appeal to really provide a Mormon school at taxpayer expense. And then the second aspect is the profit aspect.
There is a comment in here. Well, and we're no stranger to that here in Arizona. I mean, we have legislators who set up the whole grift and got in on the ground floor. It's been a few years and I'm not going to be able to remember their names. One of them, I believe, was Eddie Farnsworth, and I can't remember.
Ben Franklin.
Yes, that's right. So he opened the charter schools and then sold them for a $3-point-something million profit. And then there was Steve Yarborough. Oh my God, I can't believe I remember this stuff. But Steve Yarborough was another one, and he for the ESAs, for the vouchers. They like to call them ESAs because that's their workaround so they can make it constitutional or whatever. But he had a clearinghouse and they would process the ESAs. And he made like $1 million a year or something like that from the clearinghouse, just from processing the vouchers that were being handed out. And then, of course, I'm sure you've heard all about the scandal with what's going on here in Arizona and Christina Curso, who left abruptly because of the mismanagement of our, so vouchers in Arizona, and again, I'm sure you probably know this, but they were set up because our schools were already so underfunded that the kids who had, really serious special needs were not getting the accommodations that they needed. And so they were like, oh, well, we need vouchers so we can give these parents an opportunity to take their kids who struggle with autism, or maybe they have Down syndrome or some other either behavioral or other kind of, physical handicap or whatever, right? And now those parents, the ones who truly need the vouchers, are being pushed aside because the universal vouchers and the way that they're funding is so poorly managed right now. It's awful. There is a comment here from Dawn, and Dawn says, I would also keep in mind that many of the children of color who attend these schools are the adopted children of white conservative families, and their adopted parents are often still racist. I've actually talked to parents out here who talk about teaching their Black adopted children not to be like other Black people. And she says, I did say some harsh words to that. Those kids go to ALA. I know similar families who send their kids to Great Hearts. We meet a lot of those families in the homeschooling community. And now our vouchers have been expanded to homeschooling parents, which I find really terrifying. The idea of, as we just saw with this woman, what's her name? Ruby Frankie, right? That the fact that her child had to escape out of a window. If you don't know who Ruby Frankie is, I'm sure Lindsay will put it in the chat, but she was one of these homeschooling evangelical parents from Utah, and she's now facing 6 counts of felony child abuse. Her children were malnourished. She took away her child's bed and he had to sleep on a beanbag. So now you can get $7,000 a year to abuse children. And I know that that is not what every homeschooler does. I actually homeschooled my son for a second, but that is, I mean, without any oversight, no training. The micro schools where anybody, I could open up a school. I don't have to disclose that, you know, maybe I've got a creepy brother-in-law who lives with me half of the year, or a sex offender. Like that to me is really scary. So Diane Post says, recall that after Brown versus Board of Education, Southern schools closed completely rather than let African Americans come. So started the private schools that could remain segregated. Same thing, different year, absolutely. And Rebecca's answering Dawn. She says, I've observed the same, Dawn, with many of the children being adoptees with white parents. I posted in there, and I wonder if you listened to the podcast, Carol, Nice White Parents.
No, I heard it's wonderful. Diane Ravitch told me about it. Yeah.
I put a link in the chat there if you want to save it for later, because it is really good. I think there's maybe 6 or 10 episodes, something like that, but it gives a great history. It's specifically in New York City, but you know, about the stages that happened after Brown versus Board of Education, and how it was white flight and resegregating. Lindsay put up a link to the conference. Thanks for that, Lindsay. Matt says they look like wonderful schools too, which is what made me question their motives. It drives me, it's true. It drives me crazy when I see these beautiful, shiny charter schools. You know, like I worked in a school district, so my background is in education. I was a high school and middle school teacher, and I taught in the Isaac School District, which is in Maryvale on the west side of the valley, and it's, you know, kind of a depressed area. Like, you know, they're boarded up houses, there's, you know, a lot of crime, and it's tough. It's always tough when you're working in a Title I school, but this was next level. And then I drive just a few miles down the road, and there'd be this shiny new Great Hearts Academy in the west side, and I'm like, and meanwhile we would have to get buckets and garbage cans to collect the rainwater during the rainy season here, you know, and there weren't doors on some of the bathroom stalls. And it just frustrates me when I see that, because just a couple miles from where these kids can walk to their school, you know, there's a beautiful, shiny new school. So,
well, what a lot of what happens with charter schools is it's really a real estate scam. I mean, and that's where the big money is. You know, the people like Glenway, he makes money from the fees and things like that. But there's also a big real estate aspect, because what he does, like we put out a report about for-profit charter schools, and we actually feature what he does and how he makes his money. So they'll go in with construction, they'll build these schools, and you know, it's like every kid that walks through the door, that's money, right? That's cash. You can walk into a department store. Maybe you'll buy something and maybe you won't, right? Or maybe you'll spend $10 or maybe it'll be $200. But with charter schools, it's just beautiful for these folks, because every kid that walks through the door, there's a whole bunch of money that comes with them. So they know that that building's going to be paid off. And so what they do then is they build the building, and they'll have a separate corporation that does it, that they own. Then they'll do the lease, and they'll determine the lease terms through the for-profit. And a lot of these buildings, especially ALAs, almost go under, because what then happens after a while, most of the building has been paid off. They then sell the school to the nonprofit. So they've already paid off all of their costs. They sell the school to the nonprofit at a big increase from what they spent. And then the taxpayers are paying for that school again. So they're not just paying for it once, the taxpayers are paying for it twice. And then you're one of the states that has a really awful law, in that, let's say something happens and they decide to close the school. In some states, then that building and the property goes back to the taxpayers. It might go back to the state, may go back to the district after everything's paid off, but not in Arizona. In Arizona, the people who run the charter school, they get to keep it. So you could then take that building, turn it into condos or whatever you might want to. So Real estate, and there's all kinds of bonds and tax breaks that people get. So the real scam in charter schools we found, and it is so hard to really figure it out because it's very complicated, and we're always hoping we're going to find someone who's brilliant in real estate to help us with this. A lot of it is about real estate. That's how Farnsworth made his money. It wasn't that he sold the schools per se. He sold the buildings that house the schools, right? That's where the scam is. The guy who does Leona, he did the same thing. He kept them for a long time. He paid off all of the buildings, and then he sold the school buildings to a nonprofit who was operated by his buddy. And so, once again, the taxpayers of Arizona are paying for a building that they've paid for already with taxpayer funds. And it's less money that goes into the classroom and that goes to kids.
And I would love to think that would be enough to infuriate some folks on the far right, but I just don't think they care, because they're accomplishing the mission of indoctrinating children. I mean, like, though they say that we are the indoctrinators, we all know who the real indoctrinators are here,
Yeah, for sure.
Howard says, maybe the most effective way to stop all of this is for the Satanic Temple and American Atheists to open charter schools of their own. I'm completely down with that. Yeah, how do we open schools? Let's profit, says Mars. TST is on track to eventually, says Matt. They need funding and support first, and American Atheists would be great, or Humanist Society. I agree. And here in Arizona now too, because the private schools are getting $7,000 per kid. An advocacy organization, 1 in 10, has opened a charter, or is opening a private school that is specifically for LGBTQ youth. So that they have a safe space. Now, I don't want to misspeak, because I don't know if they only allow LGBTQ youth or their allies as well. So I would have to do more research on that. Mars says, how do we intervene and stop this madness? Do you have the answer, Carol?
Well, I mean, we try as best we can. I think the place to start when it comes to, and I know you folks in Arizona have done, made great attempts with a few initiatives, but really at this point, I mean, I think what you want to do is you want to look at the laws and try to reform the laws, right? It may be that because 1 in 3 are run by for-profit organizations, there are some states that have banned for-profits from running schools. California did that. And just look at all of the laws that you can to try to sort of rein this stuff in. Another one would be to say, hey, look, this is public money, to try to change the law so that the owners of the charter school don't own the materials if the building closed, that they do. The funding does go back to the taxpayer. Might be to reduce the funding that goes to charter schools. I've had a few people argue that when you look at charter schools, that they actually get more per pupil funding than public schools. Mm-hmm. And so working with legislators to get that amount reduced. And then if there's any way to put a lawsuit forward, I mean, that's always almost the best way in Arizona, because given the makeup of your legislature, I don't think you're going to see a lot of reform as it stands now. There's too many members of your legislature have had their finger in the pot. And I mean, they're just, I came to Arizona once when I wrote, when I first started with MP, I did a whole report on charter scandals, right? And I really hadn't known much about charter schools. There weren't any in our district. And then I did a tour of the country. I went to California, I went to Arizona, and one of the things that I found just appalled me. And I remember sitting with the superintendent, really, really wonderful guy, and he was dealing with this, in his district, losing students. And he had a conversation with a legislator, and he said, well, what is it that you want? Do you really want to get rid of all public schools? And the guy responded, no, because we're always going to need someone to take the garbage out.
Wow. Oh my
I mean,
goodness.
I think that was a pretty insightful comment. Now, whether he saw the public school taking students that he considered to be garbage, or whether he saw the public schools as the place to educate students whose career would be to collect garbage, I'm not quite sure. But that's the mindset that you're dealing with. And your public schools are so incredibly underfunded, can't attract teachers. Now, isn't it that people just with even a high school diploma can become teachers in your state?
Mhm.
So now, the advantage that public schools had of having more qualified teachers, well, that advantage now goes away. And it's a spiral. I mean, eventually, where these folks want to go, we know where they want to go. They want to go to the idea of the money follows the child, right? So that every kid gets a backpack full of cash, whether it be $7,000 or $8,000, and then they use that money to go to a private school, to go to a charter school, or to go whatever is left of a public school. But you can't run public schools on that amount of money, which then will force public schools to become, I think, online schools for the kids that nobody wants.
Mhm.
And I think that eventually the plan is, and we see this, coming out all over America, the plan is Milton Friedman's vision that the parents then would finance K-12 education, right? So if you leave it up to the state of Arizona to put $7,000 in the backpack, and you kind of can run systems with $7,000, what's to stop them the next year saying, oh, they could do it with 6. Oh, they could do it with 5. And eventually parents are financing their kids' education. And I think that's exactly, what they want.
I have a friend, her name's Mary Kay, and she is a retired principal, many, like 40 years of education. And she said long ago, like when I first met her, they are setting this, there's a 2-tiered education, and eventually what's going to happen is our public schools will be our special ed schools,
Yeah.
It'll leave behind all the children who probably had high ACEs scores, early childhood trauma, because I know there are learning disabilities that aren't necessarily caused by trauma, but trauma does cause a lot of those, and not having enough food and not having a consistent place to live, and having to put cardboard in your shoes to keep the water out. Like I had students like that in my classroom, and it's anyway, there's so many questions. I know we're not going to get through all of them, but Julie says, how does the Kennedy versus Bremerton Supreme Court decision impact this topic? I've encountered people who believe this case makes it okay to have publicly funded religious schools.
Well, you know what? We're going to find out. That's exactly what they're doing in Oklahoma. They're doing it as a test case. So, for those of you who may not be familiar with it, what happened was the diocese in Oklahoma and Tulsa want to open up a religious online charter school, right? Which is interesting. I mean, they're very low cost to run. And the governor is all for it. The superintendent of public instruction, who
he's awful.
He's in all ways and all things absolutely out of his mind. He's for it. And the state board by one vote approved it. And everybody knows what it is. It's a test case, right? So people went in, they're challenging it already. And the idea is that this will weave its way through the courts and eventually go to the Supreme Court in order for the Supreme Court to make the decision. And the thinking is because they decided in the town tuition schools in Maine and also the case in Montana that if you fund private schools, you have to fund religious schools, that they may have some success with this. We don't know whether or not they will. But with the Supreme Court, and we're going to have it around for a long time, there is absolutely a chance that they may take the case and they may rule in favor for religious charter schools. We don't know. Right now, religious organizations can run charter schools. I don't know if you know that. In fact, when Betsy DeVos was head of the Department of Education, she put in a regulation with the charter school program, which funds the startup funds, federal program for a lot of these schools. Arizona's gotten, can't even tell you how many hundreds of millions of dollars from the federal government that the Arizona then disperses to start charter schools. Well, she put in a regulation overturning what was there before, which said that religious organizations are now allowed to apply for those grants. And while they can't open religious schools per se, the religious organizations can, get the money to start the school and they can be the managers of the school. It's just that the school itself has to be secular. Well, how secular is that school going to be, right?
Right.
So yeah, we've been walking. I often say, it's been this like line in the sand with not giving religious instruction during the day with charter schools, but like all lines in the sand, a big wind comes through and boom, that line's gone. And that's what's happening right now.
Mm-hmm. Diane says Carson versus Macon is the more scary case, that if you have vouchers, you have to give them to religious schools as well. So best not to have them. Matt has some colorful things to say. Let's see. Dawn says, as a homeschooling family, I was horrified to learn that there are no checks and balances on my family. This means there are no checks and balances on the bad families either. Exactly. Janice is asking, do you have stats on disability in those schools? I know they are not held to the same rules and requirements as public schools. So do you know?
Yeah, I remember we looked at it and the percentage was lower. I'm trying to remember why we didn't include it. I think we weren't able to get stats for some of the schools. We could only get it for districts. It's not as easy to get through the Common Core of Data, which was our data source. But you already know it. You already know the answer to your question. It's going to be lower. I mean, it always is lower. It's lower, and certainly when you look at other people have done research. When you look at the preponderance of charter schools overall, the percentage of kids with disabilities is lower. And the other difference is the disability itself, right? So you'll see that when you look at the children with disabilities, kids with minor and mild disabilities, like for example, they might need help with speech. There'll be larger numbers in that. But when you look at children with Down syndrome, when you look at children with autism, when you look at children with severe learning disabilities, they're not there. And I mean, and what these schools will do is the parent will go, we get these stories all the time, they appear in the press. Parent will go to the school and they'll say, oh, well, but we really don't have a program for that, right? So then what winds up happening is now your higher need kids are concentrated in your public schools at higher and higher rates. These are the most expensive kids to teach. And the others, the voucher schools, the charter schools, they have fewer of the kids that are the most expensive to teach. So you have less resources and kids that are more expensive to teach. And it starts to be a downward spiral. for the public school, right? Scores go down, parents don't feel like their children are getting the attention they need, and it just gets worse and worse. And talking about homeschooling with ESA vouchers, I mean, I was appalled when I looked at your ESA program years ago. I wrote a piece for the answer sheet on it. And you're one of the states where you don't have to prove that the child learned anything in order to get the money the next year. I mean, I was appalled. Some will make the kids take state tests, so that's really rare. Or they make them take something, right? An SAT, an Iowa, or something. So there's some indication that the kid's learning, or they have to submit curriculum or something like that. But not in Arizona. All you need to do to get the money the next year is to show that you spent the money the year before. And I do think it's an invitation for child abuse. It's an invitation for fraud, and it's an invitation for neglect. And watch your charter school community, because trying to think of the name of the chain in Arizona. Was it Primavera? I don't think it was Primavera.
Primavera is an online school.
Yeah, and what they were doing, this thing whereby, they were providing the curriculum for the homeschoolers. So they were getting this big cut of money. And then some of them, there were some in California where then they would really do nothing other than provide the curriculum, and then they would give the parents money, and it became this draw, right? And you had parents in California bragging that they were taking their kids to Disneyland, or giving their kids horseback riding lessons and other luxuries, which these are scams that are happening both in the ESA world as well as in the charter school world.
Mm-hmm. There's so much going on in the chat. Like, this is the most lively discussion I think we've ever had, really. So it's kind of hard to keep up, and I'm trying to skim through it. We need to take out the garbage of the Arizona legislature. Absolutely. We need all hands on deck in 2024. And then Matt says we need to swarm school board meetings and vote out the fascists as well. I couldn't agree with you more, Matt, because that is what we have been doing. And on Fridays, I often say that, give us some hope. What's the hope? And I'm the one that's doling out hope these days, just because we are seeing progress. And it's because of all of you who email your school boards, who show up at your school board meetings or at the Capitol, who, are willing to support good candidates, or even in some cases run yourself. Lindsay, who had to leave early, she's actually on the board where I used to be on the board, in the Creighton School District. Creighton School District right now, by the way, is getting sued by Tom Horn because of their dual language program. And as a school board member, I remember sitting in that presentation when we learned how many classes the kids were able to get credit for. They tested, their Spanish ability was so strong. Many of them they got all of their high school credits by the time they graduated 8th grade. And he wants to take away that program. Make it make sense, America. I don't get it. But in Peoria, Rebecca Hills, one of the evangelical extremists, she stepped down, and I'm going to go ahead and take credit for it. And all of you should too, because I think it was the pressure that we were putting on in that district. We're seeing right now Paul Carver, who was a member of the 3%er militia group, and was a radical Trumper, who is now voting on the side of sanity, So here we have a guy who we thought was going to just go in with a Molotov cocktail and set it all on fire. And instead, he's actually one of the most rational thinking types of people, the kind of person that we need on board. And I never thought I'd say that about him. In Paradise Valley, the conservative, I'd say more of a moderate, she's sick and tired of these people hijacking every meeting. And I watched her gavel last time, and it's a different feeling, I think people are realizing, the rules that we used to play by, that we need to kind of up the game a little bit, because these folks don't care what the rules are. They violate open meeting law at every turn. Okay, let me see if I can Milton Friedman was an evil person. Betsy DeVos is a
Yes.
disgusting person and the antithesis of education. Absolutely. I know Matt never stops saying colorful things. Disability is a huge underreported and underrelated. Anyone recall the most recent woman in an Arizona charter school scandal? She was recently put in jail. It's so hard to keep track of the charter school scandals here in Arizona. Like, I need to have a running list.
Well, I'll tell you, there is a place where you can get a running list. Let me see if I can get this up, and then I'm gonna have to go. So let's see if I can. Can you get me control of the screen again, or do I need to do that? Or
if you just click the green where it says share screen, you should be able to then choose which one of your screens.
oh,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, I don't know what did I do that I can't even see. Maybe if I go back to Zoom. Here we go. All right. Ta-da! Another day, another charter school scandal. We have this on our website. You can do a search, and you can do a search by state. We've been keeping these up for quite a while now. Let's see if I can get them to pull up. I don't know why it doesn't want to seem to work for me. Let me see if I do it this way. There you go.
That is really cool, though.
Arizona, and there's pages. There's just
Wow.
pages of them. So if you go to our webpage and you look under our work, you'll see our reports, including the reports on for-profit, including the report I talked about today, a report on school closures. And then if you click on charter scandals, you see another day, another charter school scandal. We started that a couple years ago, and I thought, well, we'll have a couple of months. Guess what, my friends? Another day, it's another charter scandal. And we keep it up every month. We refresh, and you can search on the name of the schools. You can also search on your state. And you know, if you are trying to make a case, say with a legislator or with a school board or with your governor, it's a good resource tool for you to use. So, you know, come by our site, look around. We have a lot of our focus as the Network for Public Education, and we're the only national organization that we know of that has this as almost our exclusive focus. We have 350,000 members, and that is to protect and preserve public schools. We believe that every parent's first choice is a good public school. And when they're making these other choices, it's because somebody's abandoned the public school in their area. So use ours. You talked about having candidates. We have a sister organization, MPE Action. We do endorsements, and we send those endorsements out. We can't financially support the candidate. We're not a PAC, but we can do endorsements. So as you have these different races, if one of you are running or somebody else you support for school board, shoot me an email, and we'll see if we can get the person endorsed.
That's great, Carol, because Secular AZ just joined a coalition of other organizations that are we're focused specifically on school board candidates. So I will be sure, I'll be sure to let them know, and I can't wait to meet you in person in DC. I'm definitely going to bookmark this page. I have this page is important to bookmark, and there's another page where they track all child sex offenders. And unfortunately, the vast majority of them are, oftentimes religious leaders, many times, other positions of power, police officers, etc. So I have that one bookmarked, and now I'm going to bookmark this one too. But this has been one of the best Friday discussions. I've really enjoyed it, Carol. What's your hope that you can give us? Can you give us some hope real quick?
Well, you know what? I think that the hope is that they're overplaying their hand. You talked about that too, and while I think they're making, sadly for you, real inroads in red states, they're not making those same kind of inroads in blue states. It's, there's a lot more control, and the hope is going to be that eventually the public rises up and you start to see over time that in states that still treasure their public schools, that still pay their teachers a good wage, that the kids have higher achievement, they have better outcomes, and eventually places in Arizona, the business community will say, hey, wait a minute, look at all of these undereducated kids, what's happening? Because this is not a solution. This is absolutely not a solution. And I do want to mention too, before I hop off, we have local, state, and national grassroots education groups that are part of our network. Some of them are national groups, and then we also have groups by state. And we would love it. I'll send you the connection to see Arizona. Here are some of the groups that are already part of the coalition. I mean, it's a loose coalition. You don't have to pay dues. You don't have to even believe certain beliefs, right? You're just united in your belief for public education, separation of church and state in public education. And I can send you the information. You're welcome to join.
Oh, that's great. That's great. All right. Well, thanks again, Carol. This was a fantastic discussion, something that everybody should be aware of. And I hope that everybody has a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.
Everybody.